Oh, whoops. I mean, it's really early in the game. It's not like it's gonna die. Hmm.
For context, here are the stats. Now that's established, let's go. Supermassive Games is a British game studio that's been around since 2008. They didn't get much done in those days, mostly working as support for PlayStation titles, namely DLC for Little Big Planet and titles for the PlayStation Move controller. They once tried to make it big with a Doctor Who video game called The Eternity Clock, but no one likes Doctor Who, so it flopped. I'm just kidding. The game just sucks. It isn't until 2015, when they released Until Dawn, that the studio gained their niche in interactive drama horror games. A niche that they tried to explore with Sony with some more games, to middling responses. Still, they wanted to expand on it, so Supermassive Games had the idea to work with Bandai Namco to publish their next major idea, an Anthology series. Released back in August of 2019, Man of Medan marks the beginning of the Dark Pictures Anthology. As the first game in the series, expectations would be high, as many people would have directly compared it to Until Dawn, for better or worse. Does it stack up? Well, it's better in some areas, worse than others. Let me try to break it down. Originally, I had the story and gameplay in separate categories, but they're so linked together that it becomes hard to talk about one without mentioning the other. So, let's see how this works. The game draws its inspiration from the real-life legend of the SS Orang Medan, a ghost ship rumored to have been found adrift with a dead crew under mysterious circumstances. You follow a group of 5 characters who find themselves trapped aboard an abandoned World War II-era freighter. The story itself unfolds through both your decisions and reflexes, with every choice carrying potential consequences for the character's fates. Man of Medan is split between 2 types of gameplay, exploration and quick-time events. Let's talk about the exploration part first. It is easily the worst part of this game. Now, that's not the fairest thing to say. When you're blind to the game and trying to figure out the secrets of the ship and all that, it helps to build up an atmosphere for a horror game, right? After you beat it the first time, subsequent playthroughs aren't great, as, if you're in the same scenes, you know exactly when something is going to happen, akin to like watching a horror movie after you've seen it before. The exploration is designed around specific triggers by walking through rooms, so on first playthrough, it's fine. But afterwards, when you don't care about getting the secrets anymore, you're confronted with the fact that moving around is a slog, especially when you consider that the characters move very sluggishly. Due to how the characters walk and how the fixed camera angles can go, I often find that I walk into walls or struggle to get into rooms. While thankfully there are no segments dedicated to surviving through these controls, it adds more frustration than there needs to be. So, as one half of the gameplay experience, that's disappointing. This is the criticism I would have made of Until Dawn as well, so it's not alone in that aspect. But that's not why you're here. Why you're here is for the main gameplay mechanic that will change the narrative, the core of why you want to play this game, the QuickTime events. The QuickTime events by themselves aren't special. In no particular order, Man of Medan has 5 types of QuickTime events. It has button presses, action QTEs where you move your cursor to the right spot, button mashes, dialogue options, and their unique one as far as I'm aware, keep calm QTEs. The last one being a replacement from Until Dawn's Don't Move QTEs, which I guess they did because this is a multi-platform game, so it's not reliant on a PlayStation controller. None of these things are hard to understand, so players can get right into the content easily, but they might be a bit buggy? Particularly on the lethal difficulty, as the timing I think is kind of off, but I can't really prove that. These QuickTime events will lead the narrative into the direction that you may or may not want, depending on how good you are at them. It's the type of gameplay style that I personally have issues with at times, as many of the permutations that come from this story come from you succeeding or failing these QTEs. And some of these failed actions or choices can lead to instant death, sometimes in ways that seems rather unfair due to how fast they can be at times. It's a preference thing, but knowing I must fail to get different content doesn't feel natural. If you're okay with failing being your content, Man of Medan has a lot to offer regarding the narrative framework of its story. One thing that's easy to complain about with Until Dawn is how much of the story is railroaded. Because the story was railroaded, most of your actions in the beginning didn't matter compared to the end. This is a double-edged sword for the narrative that also influences everything about the game. With Until Dawn, the characters having that plot armor allowed you to grow into liking them, at the cost of your choices not really mattering for most of the game. So, unlike Until Dawn, Man of Medan goes in the opposite direction. The people here have significantly less plot armor. However, this lack of plot armor means that we don't really have that many chapters dedicated to them specifically. Once things start going bad, every chapter starts becoming a chance to die, which doesn't give them much time to focus on anything other than surviving. Thing is, the focus on not dying for the characters actually creates a surprisingly fluid narrative framework, as characters can kind of replace each other for roles that need to be filled in. The particular ending you get, the amount of people that survive, the relationship values, these together all make a lot of different versions of events that can happen in this game, many of which I haven't seen due to 5 playthroughs just not being enough. So consider that a major factor for why you would at least want to try out the game. Playing completely blind, it's rather unlikely for 2 players to ever have the same exact playthrough. And that's cool. On paper. I have found that many of the choices that lead to these end states are mostly condensed to the latter half of the game. Also, while how an event is played out might be unique to you, some events are still going to happen no matter what. For example, there's a scene here where 2 people must go down a hole. The order can be mixed up based on how many people are alive to be here and what your characters' relationships are like, but the second you enter the scene, 2 people are going down that hole. It's a narrative constraint, one that I understand, as making a new branch for the story to go in constantly would take up way too much time in development. But it does feel kind of disappointing on that end. Mostly cause, well, okay, enough dancing around it. The story is weaker compared to Until Dawn. The beginning half moves at an extremely slow pace. Like, so slow I would have switched to watching something else if this was a movie. This wasn't a problem in Until Dawn, as their character traits felt more like stereotypes in horror movies, so it was easier to remember and engage in. Here, the cast feel like normal people, so they're blander by comparison. Like, they're trying with the material they got, but what they got character-wise is just not that interesting. It doesn't help that the models look a bit lifeless at times, which can make their acting sound weaker as a result. It also doesn't help that everything in the game is unskippable except for the intro montage in the credits. If you're on your second playthrough, watching through these scenes again after just beating it isn't great. They have a chapter select screen, so if you want to go to specific parts, you can. But when every choice you make changes character dynamics and such, you pretty much have to play from the beginning to get a fresher experience. As a side note, for reasons I'm not quite sure of, most of the actors here have separate body models from their voice actors. My assumption is so that they can mix and match different bodies with voices in the other games in the Anthology, but it does make crediting them a bit weird. The only one who isn't like this is Conrad, who's played by Shawn Ashmore of X-Men and Quantum Break fame. The assumption I guess is for star power, cause he's also on the box, and I imagine isn't in the rest of the Anthology. The first half is typically where all the acting problems usually are, as there's not really much for them to act with. The latter half, when the story picks up, is good, cause that's where the narrative can really shift around with the gameplay, and I do like the twist involved. But I wonder if it's too impersonal? Like, these guys are just having a really bad day, compared to the more involved plot that Until Dawn had. Personal preference on that from me, but maybe that isn't much of a problem for you if you play it. Overall, on the story, it has a bit of an impossible problem. You can't have situations where everybody can die in the beginning since you want to build up these characters, but you can have your choices matter in a significant way because of it. The story doesn't have a permanent feel in the sense that its predecessor had, but unless they want to do some massively branching storyline, I'm not sure what else you could do. I guess your mileage will depend if you enjoy having uniqueness of how your narrative goes, over having a stronger plot to begin with. I will give props to the sound design in Man of Medan. It is integral for a horror game to create tension and amplify fear to immerse players in the atmosphere. Supermassive Games collaborated with composer Jason Graves, who's done other horror games like Dead Space and Until Dawn. I'm not going to say the music is party material or anything, but Jason Graves' score of soft, foreboding melodies and sharp, frantic thrillers adds a lot to the atmosphere. That being said, silence is key, as the music tends to not play in a lot of scenes. The environmental sounds take center stage, as ambient noises are abundant. You're surrounded with creaking metals and shifting debris as the ship continues to decay. Soft whispers and distant cries in the wind from places you can't see. The ever-present roar of the ocean in the background threatening to flood everything. All that good stuff. It's all incredibly solid. Although, I'm rather jaded on the jump scare noises. At times I can see them coming from like a mile away and find the sudden noises to be rather generic because of it. Overall, I have no problems with the sound of this game, as it's well crafted for the experience. One thing to note about Man of Medan is that it is very much designed with multiplayer in mind. The online shared story mode allows two players to experience different perspectives simultaneously, while the local movie night mode encourages the group to pass the controller as the narrative progresses. The way the story works is that both players will effectively be coordinating events at the same time without actually showing what the other player is seeing, allowing for story events that are rather neat since it's through their personal point of view. Experiences may vary obviously when playing a horror game like this with other people, but mine was fun, so I do recommend it. There is a noticeable flaw, however, not in the multiplayer itself, but in how it affects the single player. See, some of these chapters are designed with the intention of being played at the same time as another person. If, by chance, you exhaust all the things to do while waiting for your partner, you have to just wait around until they're done.
Am I literally waiting for you?
But, in single player, you are playing these chapters by yourselves in a weird way. Instead of just letting the chapter continue once you're done with all your interactions, you must wait until an invisible timer is done with to progress. Frankly, I'm not sure why it's done like this. It's rather baffling, which adds to my issues about replayability, as I am stuck just literally sitting around doing nothing, waiting for the next chapter to start. But regardless of that, it was a neat experience narratively to try it through multiplayer, and I would recommend trying it with a friend if you can find one with a copy.
In all the right places, if you catch me. Yeah, I caught it. And I tossed it back. You don't seem to give up easily, do you? For
Oh, hi,
this could
Alex.
be a war grave. Disturbing it would be illegal and immoral.
Wait, were you here the whole time?
You know,
You just suddenly appeared like,
and I am ready to get
like a
You've
ghost.
literally
What the-
never spoken to a woman before in your life, have you? No.
The danger of playing a narrative game like this is the breaking of the illusion that the game creates. On my first playthrough, I had a good time with the game. On second playthrough, not so much. Many of my issues are almost certainly due to the static nature of the game. Video games are a medium of interactivity, so in a horror game, if you know exactly when something is going to happen, it's not particularly scary, is it? That's not necessarily fair, but what can you do? The problem lies in the illusion. These types of games thrive off of the idea that all of your choices matter, so once the veil is lifted, you're just left with what it is. To me, the lackluster first half and the weaker characters alone make it weaker than Until Dawn in terms of memorability, even though it is arguably a better game replayability-wise. I also have separate other personal issues. For one, I really hate how I can't skip this cutscene gameplay. The choices in QTEs are so reliant on the visuals that I have to listen to them talk about the same things constantly again and again and again. Yes, I can change their relationships, but is that really worth going through the preamble every single time? Especially for things I can't even change anyways? Like the inciting incident on why they even get on the boat? This seems to be a problem that a lot of narrative studios seem to have, including Telltale Games and Quantic Dream. But surely there has to be a way to incorporate skipping the cutscenes and still keeping the gameplay. Also, I hate this letterbox format. I have a nice monitor. I'd really like to use my whole monitor. The games are fully modeled in 3D, and I severely doubt the letterboxing was to hide unfinished details. It should be an option or something to get rid of it, especially since due to a visual bug, I know for a fact it can be done.
We're wasting time.
Where are the black
We
bars?
have to do it now.
Time to get off this ship.
Speaking of, this game is buggy. In making of an anthology, they must have rushed production, as I have found things breaking all over the place. I have maybe seen that this is a result of adding the curator's cut to the game, which is the multiplayer version of the game that can be done on single player. It's also irrelevant. The number of bugs I've seen for a game that's effectively a movie is rather ridiculous. At least on the PC port anyway. I'm seeing people teleporting, screens not loading as gameplay is happening,
Oh, talking makes bubbles. That's kind of a neat detail.
people just not appearing.
What?
Fantastic.
Oh boy, this game is just falling apart at the seams.
The dead end.
Like, this is not great. To cut it some slack, this is meant to be one of 4 separate projects, under a publisher that I imagine doesn't give them as much money as Sony. The scale that they are working with demands more time and money, which is apparent when we consider what Until Dawn managed to pull off. If this is their first effort with a significantly reduced budget, it's a great attempt, but all the same, it still falls short. In summary, Man of Medan is an ambitious but kind of disappointing start to the Dark Pictures anthology. I can give it props for its atmosphere, story concept, narrative framework, and multiplayer. However, its awkward controls, uneven pacing, lackluster character and story execution, and unfriendly nature for additional playthroughs hurts the experience. Realistically, I don't expect people to play Man of Medan more than once or twice, which is probably to its benefit. Maybe their next game will be better, maybe not. But I do know that the problems that this game has is not something that could be solved easily. It would require a massive upscaling of what potential choices you could do, or a drastic shift in gameplay from what they wanted, none of which would be particularly feasible mid-development. Make no mistake, I would still recommend it for people who like narrative-driven interactive horror games. It does offer engaging things for people that don't find what I'm talking about an issue, and on first playthrough, it's good. But it's a game begging for you to explore the other paths, but the paths just lead back to the same road with not much to show for it. If you're interested, get it on sale. I wouldn't certainly call this game bad, but it could certainly be better. Hi? The video's over. Thanks for sticking by all the way to the end, I guess. I guess if you made it to the end, I might as well show you something. Here's a little compilation of what I consider to be the scariest part of Man of Medan, the true horror of the game. Please, enjoy.
No shoes? What an animal.
Input on something?
Can you wear shoes, bro?
Just,
It's one tetanus shot from the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, speaking of tetanus shots, I really hope y'all had yours, because y'all don't have shoes.
Stay sharp and keep our eyes out for the right moment.
we gotta get back to the boat and find Brad.
They swiped our distributor cap. Gonna be
The
different.
real horror isn't the ghosts, it's the tetanus.
So,
I'm staring at her feet. I just can't. I can't. Just like, this is terrible for your feet. Take some of the old clothes that are lying around and put them around your feet, Christ. So bad. Still together? Oh god, look how dirty the floor is!
okay. Safe to say.
Yeah, just add dirty water to all those rust-filled cuts, I'm sure you have. Granted, I would probably have tetanus after all of this. Especially since I decided to come here without shoes!
Are you okay?
No, my feet are dirty and I broke my ankles.
All good.
Okay.